Report. On this edition of Native Report, we visit the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center, where we view a very special exhibit of female elders from Wisconsin's 12 Native nations.
We learn about Bay Bank, a financial institution owned and operated by the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin.
And we meet Vietnam veteran Daniel King of the Oneida Nation, who discusses his experiences during the tumultuous era of the 60s.
We also learn something new about healthy living and hear from our elders on this edition of Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux community, the Blandin Foundation, and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Rita Aspinwall.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. Mary Burns is an award-winning jacquard weaver, and it is through her hand-woven weavings Mary honors and celebrates 12 Native elder females, one from each of the 11 federally recognized tribes, and one from a community seeking federal recognition in Wisconsin. Join us now as we learn about the Ancestral Women exhibit.
A unique exhibit of 12 hand-woven portraits at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center had its beginnings with only one portrait. What makes this unique besides the unusual medium is the subject matter: elder Native women.
I was actually working with the Wisconsin Historical Society collections, and as I was going through their collections, I found several images of a Ho-Chunk woman, and these just captivated me. She just seemed to have such strength and dignity, and she was just beautiful. And as I was preparing that design and starting to weave it, I had one of those moments that it's an inspiration, and I just got the whole idea for the exhibit. As I was weaving that and trying to think through the project, I knew that I needed to go to all 12 of the Native American tribes in Wisconsin, which I have done, and see who they would like to have honored and portrayed in the exhibit. In more cases than not, I was working with the tribal historic preservation officers. But at other places I worked with a museum director or someone from the tribal council, or in another case, elder women.
Mary's preferred medium is jacquard weaving. Each project took about a month to complete, from the initial design to the final portrait.
It's a special technique, and you have to have a special loom to do this kind of work. And a loom has threads on it called the warp. And on normal looms, you lift clusters of those threads. They go through heddles. Now I program the computer with the weave structures and sample the piece on the loom. After testing, I adjust the design and weave structures and 20 warp ends on my jacquard loom. I can control each of them individually. The loom will lift warp threads for each pick or shuttle throw. The loom lifts whatever threads I've programmed it to pick up. The loom lifts the chosen warp threads. I throw the shuttle. The yarn unwinds from the bobbin. I close the shed and beat the yarn into place. This is the photograph the Brotherton gave me. As you see, it's very washed out and the background is quite simple. Here is my initial sketch of Polly. Here is the more developed sketch. I decided the background should be a forest of large trees. I wanted the sun and sky to be almost shining through her. Now I reduce the number of shades in the design. I go from hundreds of shades to approximately a dozen. My mantra is simplify, simplify, simplify. For each shade, I assign a separate weave structure. Each weave structure builds on the previous weave structures. Women are generally the carriers of water, based initially on the fact that they are the childbearing people, and they carry that water and that life. And so I think in many traditional cultures globally, women are the water protectors. I really wanted to honor the women and have the exhibit celebrate women. But the clans, in talking with many of the women, the clan and families, the clans are very important. So I selected 6 different clans to represent, and I know that they are not all the same in each of the tribes, but a general representation. This is Polymore de Groot, and many current-day Brotherton Indians trace their ancestry to her. She, I believe, was a Mohawk Indian, and the Brotherton are not federally recognized. They're the 12th tribe in Wisconsin. So I wanted to have at least one of the portraits have a map showing how many times these different tribes had to move. Some of them 4 times in 60 years. The Oneidas were 4 times in 60 years.
Also woven by Mary are 4 scenes representative of traditional activities important to many, if not all of the tribes. The response she has received has been very positive.
I feature birch bark canoe building and wild ricing and maple sugaring. And then the 4th panel is more capturing the spirit of a place and the spirit of water and how water relates to women. Doing these landscape pieces is just a different approach because I have to draw it all out, or I'm working from photos, from historical photos for these. But I'm drawing it horizontally, but then when I go to weave it, I'm weaving it vertically. So it's a little bit more challenging. I've been so blessed to do this work and to meet so many people through the exhibit. The day we were installing the exhibit here, we just had the structure up, and we were taking the portraits out of the boxes, and they were leaning against the walls, and all of a sudden I heard this man saying, "Oh, Auntie, Auntie, Auntie," and I looked up, and this man was standing in front of the weaving of Harriet Bulber, which wasn't even hung yet. And Harriet had been his aunt, and he had no idea that the exhibit was in existence, and no idea that his aunt was part of it. So many families are very emotional about it. Seeing Native women being honored.
Atrial fibrillation is an irregular heartbeat. Normally the heartbeats are regular and very well timed, and the normal resting adult heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute, with the average being about 72. A normally conducted heartbeat starts with a signal in the top of the heart, the atria, and this spreads to the bottom part of the heart, or ventricles. The ventricles do most of the pumping of blood to the lungs and to the rest of the body. When everything is timed right, this is a ballet, and the top part of the heart squeezes blood into the ventricles, then they squeeze after they're filled by the atria. An EKG, or electrocardiogram, shows the first bump, or P wave, as the electrical signal that starts the heartbeat. There's a short pause, then the QRS complex represents the signal for the ventricles contracting, then the T wave follows, and this shows the ventricles repolarizing so they can fire again. What happens with atrial fibrillation is that there are many signals that come from the atria, and many of them can make it through to fire the ventricles. These signals are random, and then normal timing is lost. The rate is usually 100 to 175 beats per minute, and the heart can't fill fast enough to pump properly at those rates. This results in palpitations or heart pounding, shortness of breath, fatigue, and sometimes chest pain. The EKG in atrial fibrillation does not show regular P waves, but a squiggly line from all the beats trying to get through, and the atria are quivering instead of pumping regularly. Sometimes atrial fibrillation only lasts a short time and returns to a regular rate afterward. Sometimes it can persist and needs to be cardioverted or shocked back into a regular rhythm, and sometimes people end up in persistent and permanent atrial fibrillation if converting them doesn't work. The heart rate needs to be slowed down, and there are medicines to help with this. One of the risks of atrial fibrillation is stroke. When the atria are quivering instead of contracting regularly, blood doesn't move the way it normally does. Blood that sits forms clots, and these can go into the aorta, which is the main artery coming out of the heart. The first branches off the aorta feed the brain, and a clot going into the brain can cut off blood flow, resulting in a stroke. This is why people with atrial fibrillation are often put on blood thinners. One of the tests used before cardioverting someone back into a regular rhythm is a transesophageal echocardiogram. This is an ultrasound of the heart done through a thin probe through the mouth and into the esophagus to get a close look at the atria to make sure there are no clots in there. Risks for atrial fibrillation are coronary artery disease, hypertension, heart failure, heart valve disease, thyroid disorders, COPD, obstructive sleep apnea, and advanced age. Alcohol use is another major risk factor for atrial fibrillation. There are medicines to help control the rate, and some can keep people in a regular rhythm. Blood thinners to prevent clot formation are generally used, and sometimes people need pacemakers. Ablation procedures destroy tissue that allows signals to get through, and these are sometimes used. Lifestyle changes are important. Weight loss, exercise, avoiding alcohol and non-traditional tobacco are things you can do to avoid or help treat atrial fibrillation. Your healthcare provider can help you with all of these. Remember to call an elder. They've been waiting for your call. I'm Dr. Arnie Vinio, and this is Health Matters.
Bay Bank was founded in 1995 by the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and a group of 5 Green Bay area businessmen. In 2000, the Oneida Nation became the sole owner and operator of Bay Bank. Today, it is one of the major deliverers of financial services in northeastern Wisconsin.
As president and CEO of Bay Bank, a community bank located in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Jeff Bowman has over 30 years of banking experience and is a strong advocate of economic development activity in Wisconsin's Indian country. We caught up with Jeff while he was at the National Congress of American Indians annual convention to learn more about Bay Bank.
Well, the bank was started in 1995. In the mid-90s, there were a lot of bank mergers going on, so a lot of small community banks were being gobbled up by the large banks, and it left the void of the service that a small bank can provide to local customers. And so there was a group of area businessmen that had the idea of forming a brand new bank in Green Bay, and they approached the Oneida tribe, and they went into business together. They both put in half of the money to get the bank capitalized and get it launched. That was in 1995 when the bank opened. And then about 5 years later, the Oneida tribe purchased the interest of the other founding members. So since 1995, the last 17 years, the bank has been owned solely by the Oneida Nation now. Serving Oneida tribal members, it's a huge part of our business and a very important part of the business. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why the tribe was interested in helping capitalize the bank, is they saw that people in the Oneida community weren't getting the service that they should get for banking. So today we originate about anywhere between 500 to 600 consumer loans, and most of those loans are to Oneida tribal members. About half of them are unsecured, small dollar loans for, average size is about $1,500. And that's a hard loan for people to obtain at an affordable rate. A lot of times they're going to a payday lending store or a short-term lending store where the interest rates are outrageous. It makes it really hard for those people to pay those loans back. So we provide a small dollar loan service with affordable terms. That's about half of the volume each year.
The other half of the consumer loans are used car loans. According to Jeff, this allows people to get a reliable used vehicle, which is a valuable service to community members.
We enjoy a lot of used car loan business, and it helps a lot of tribal members, so we love helping people in that way. The other line of business that we're really proud of is we are the largest originator and servicer of mortgage loans under the HUD 184 loan program in the Great Lakes area. Not only do we help Oneida tribal members, but we have a strong presence in all the tribal communities in Wisconsin. Oneida, Menominee, Stockbridge, Ho-Chunk, all the Ojibwe tribes in northern Wisconsin. In the last couple of years, we've also branched off into lower and upper Michigan. And so today we have over $60 million of mortgage loans in that portfolio. Every one of those borrowers is a member of a federally recognized tribe. That helps tribal communities tremendously because you're converting renters into homeowners, you're helping people build equity in their primary residence, and that loan product is a great tool. So we're real proud to be a big player in that line of business. It's really important, not only just to the community members, but it creates a strong and reliable revenue source for the bank.
Another program that is unique to the Oneida Nation is the Home Ownership Independent Purchase Program, or HIP, that allows enrolled Oneida Nation members to purchase a home within the Oneida Reservation boundaries.
There's no way that any tribe can generate enough cash flow to satisfy the need for mortgage lending in their community. So Oneida came up with a very creative program. For example, let's say you had a budget of $500,000 a year to help with home ownership for tribal members. One way to deploy that money is you can make 5 $100,000 loans and create 5 new homeowners. But Oneida came up with a very innovative program recently where they figured out how to leverage that $500,000 and stretch it, make it go farther. Instead of using a finite amount of money to help fund 5 house purchases, you can take that same pot of money and help multiple homeowners purchase a house, but the tribe is only putting in $10,000 on each transaction instead of $100,000. So it's a really unique and innovative way to increase home ownership in the community.
Bay Bank is also very active in small business lending. About 75% of their loan portfolio is in commercial loans.
The things that we really like doing is seeing a small business grow, and when they're renting a building, and then they have the opportunity to buy their first building. And so when you move from renting to owning a business, a building when you're a small business, all of a sudden you're building equity. And so it's really nice to see those small business people transition to owning larger assets. But small business lending is important to us both in the general Green Bay area. We have a lot of customers at the bank, both tribal and non-tribal, but we really love helping tribal-owned businesses. You know, the tribal communities in Wisconsin are near and dear to our heart, and we really think that's important to the bank. In fact, in the mission statement of the bank, actually reduced the writing in our strategic plan. We lay out what target groups we're interested in, and that's the Oneida community, the Green Bay community at large, and the other tribal communities of Wisconsin. And making sure that when the tribes in the Great Lakes area need something, they think of Bay Bank.
I got a letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs from Albuquerque, and there was a check for 88 cents, I think it was, well anyhow, small check. And then I got one a week later, no explanation. I got another one a week later, $1.26. And I got curious, and I called them up and said, "What's this all about?" And they said, "You have to call Bemidji to find out." So I called Bemidji, and they said, "Well, you got to call Fond du Lac." And so I called Fond du Lac, and they said, "Well, yeah, you belong here." And he said, "You want to officially enroll?" I said, "Well, sure." And that was back in the late 50s, or early, right around 59 and 60 or something like that. And so that's how I found out. And suddenly when I came up here, I felt at home. The first time I came up here, it was kind of like, well, nobody stared at me no more. And I had long black hair, and I was darker than I am now. And it was suddenly it was all right.
Daniel King is a veteran of the United States Army who fought in the Vietnam War. We sat down with Daniel to learn about the experiences that have shaped who he is today, a respected elder of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin.
Daniel King was born and raised on the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, but because of the Indian Relocation Act, his family later moved to Chicago. This was during the early 1960s, a time when the United States involvement in Vietnam was building.
First time I ever heard of Vietnam was in grade school and figured it'll end by then. Next thing I know, there it is. But before that, it was kind of nice because we were just coming of age, it seemed like, and your life was just starting. And next thing you know, I was joining the service and ended up going into the Army. And the only difference is I didn't tell anybody. My mom, friends, 3 months after I had left, they take your picture of basic or whatever in your first uniform, and they sent it to her, and that's how she knew then that I was in the service. And I still didn't come home. Even after my initial basic and AIT and all this, I felt I didn't want to come home because then we drew orders for Vietnam. And I felt like if they gave you that 30 days leave, it was more like I'm coming home to say goodbye to everybody. And I just didn't feel comfortable, so I just said, send me now, because if I go home, I may not come back.
It was in 1971 when Daniel enlisted in the Army. His experiences in boot camp made him wonder what he had gotten himself into.
It was scary, because you're not prepared for it. And when you got people screaming at you in the face, you start wondering, what am I doing? What did I do? Why are you screaming at me? And you're just not used to it. They're barking orders at you. They got control of your life. They're telling you when you can go to the bathroom, when to eat. Their job is to break you. Physically, they'll get you in shape. They get anybody in shape. Mentally, they want to see how much you can take. They want to see how you guys function as a team. Who helps who? Whose mind is in the right place, I guess, to survive if you go to combat. Part of it, I feel, is like if you're captured too. How much can you take being a prisoner of war? Because even in basic, they just threw a little bit at you. And it's like, I don't want to be captured. So as we advanced in our training, it became more intense.
Daniel said that even though boot camp was tough, it really did not prepare him for Vietnam. He literally hit the ground running.
I remember coming into Plouquet, which is the biggest city in the area we were in. We could hear something hit the plane. And we were in a AC-130 plane, cargo, not a cargo, but transport, Army transport. And you could hear them things hitting, and we're looking like, damn, was the plane falling apart? We started laughing. And the sergeant said, no, those are bullets hitting the side of the plane. And we're like, what? Well, they were under fire. And finally, they made the decision. They said, when we're landing, they're shutting the engines and they're going to do a roll. And when that back door opens, you jump and you get your head together, you look for the hut that had the big cross on it, and you run for that. We're like, why? Because the air base is under attack. It's hot. The door opened, it felt like an oven. And then yet you got to jump and run. It's like, wow, what's going on?
He was then told to report to the 173rd Airborne. As soon as he reached his brigade, he was given a weapon and was on patrol that evening.
Looking back, first person I took, and I felt, wow, I saved us. And checking his body like we're supposed to, finding a book, opening it, or taking it out. And I should have took it to our sergeant. Instead, I opened it, and there's a picture of his wife and 2 kids. What did I do? Why did I do that? He's got 2 kids. I don't know. He didn't do nothing. And I killed him. And I can tell you, his daughter's probably 47 years old, and his son's probably around 45, 44 years old today. And that sticks with you that long.
After his tour ended, he made his way back home, but he was a changed man. He suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. He started writing about his experiences, which proved to be therapeutic.
That was my own way of healing what I thought, what my opinion was. That was important. And I think I ended up with like 15 notepads of writings, both sides. I had to forgive myself, and that started my healing. I feel like maybe that's what I'm supposed to do, is write these and share those stories. So if I help one person, that's good. It makes me feel good, but it helps me survive too.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org, on Facebook, and on Twitter.
Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors in Indian Country. I'm Ernie Stevens.
And I'm Rita Aspinwall. Join us next time for another Native Report.
Rita Aspinwall is an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and is an ICWA social worker with Fond du Lac Social Services. Ernie Stevens is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and is a film and television producer. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux community, the Blandin Foundation, and the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation.